A young nurse accepts a drink from a stranger at a bar, unaware he's the new director of the hospital where she works. What he does next changes both their lives forever. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Melissa Evans, a 35-year-old nurse of medium height with light brown hair always tied back in a neat ponytail, felt her shoulders ache as she pulled off her gloves. The night shift in the Hillcrest Hospital emergency department had stretched beyond the usual hours. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a stark glare on the floor, while the lingering scent of antiseptic filled the hallways. She exhaled slowly, recalling the day's most challenging patient, an elderly gentleman with heart complications who needed constant monitoring and gentle reassurance. Despite her exhaustion, Melissa prided herself on maintaining an attentive, empathetic gaze for each patient. Her co-workers admired how she instinctively asked about their families or offered a comforting word when fear clouded their eyes. Yet as she stood by the nurse's station finalizing her notes, she realized just how drained she truly was. Her inner voice whispered that this relentless cycle of caring for others was wearing her down in ways she barely acknowledged. Rebecca Wright, 38 years old and Melissa's closest colleague, approached with a concerned expression. Rebecca's warm smile and easygoing demeanor often lightened tense situations. But tonight, she wore a worried frown. "Mel, you look about ready to collapse," she said, placing a gentle hand on Melissa's arm. "Why don't you join me later? A few of the girls are heading to Redwood's Lounge. You need a break, and we could all use a laugh after a shift like this." Melissa hesitated, tugging at the lanyard around her neck. There was a tug of war inside her, a pull between wanting to disappear into a quiet evening at home and the guilt of refusing an invitation that might lift her spirits. She gave Rebecca an apologetic shrug. "I don't know. I've got that stack of continuing education files at home, and I'm beyond tired." Rebecca shook her head. "Those files can wait. It's not a sin to take care of yourself, you know. Just think about it. You deserve a chance to unwind." Nodding, Melissa moved to the staff locker room, where rows of metal lockers and the sharp smell of antiseptic soap reinforced the reality of her life. The hum of the overhead lighting in the cramped space felt almost accusatory. Here she was again, finishing another marathon shift. She peeled off her scrubs, each movement a reminder of her fatigue. With every article of clothing folded away, she thought about the nights spent studying medical charts in her tiny apartment, the calls from patients' families at odd hours, and her own yearning for a moment of true rest. When she caught her reflection in the small mirror above the sink, she noted the dark circles under her grayish-green eyes and the faint lines etched around them. She wondered when she had last taken time to laugh without restraint or enjoy a night out that wasn't hospital-related. There had been a moment early in her career when she felt every day held the promise of making a real difference. Now, that fervor still flickered within her, but it was buried beneath layers of fatigue and responsibility. In the quiet hush of the locker room, she remembered how her old mentor used to say, "You can't pour from an empty cup." It dawned on her that perhaps she was running dangerously low. Rebecca's invitation felt like a lifeline dangling before her, inviting her to breathe again, even if only for a little while. Sighing, Melissa checked her phone. Messages from her small circle of friends flashed across the screen, each one urging her to come out, to let go of the stress if only for a night. Her mind still wrestled with guilt. Who was she to indulge in fun while patients filled the wards? Yet a deeper part of her recognized that if she ignored her own needs indefinitely, she risked losing the compassion that first drew her to nursing. Finally, she exhaled and typed a quick response to Rebecca, letting her know she would come. Though she had no idea how much a single evening outside the familiar confines of the hospital would alter her life, She sensed the need for change. With her white nurse's jacket folded carefully in her locker, Melissa closed the metal door, determined to reclaim a small slice of herself before stepping back into the chaos of another day. Melissa approached the entrance of Redwood's lounge with an unexpected flutter of nerves. The wooden sign above the door, softly illuminated by fairy lights, gave the bar a homey, rustic feel against the backdrop of the bustling city street. An autumn chill whispered through the air, making her pull her coat tighter around her shoulders. She paused briefly, wondering if she should turn back and retreat to the comfort of her apartment. But the fatigue in her bones and the echo of Rebecca's encouragement propelled her forward. Inside, warm light and the hum of conversation welcomed her. A subtle aroma of fried appetizers and a distant hint of whiskey drifted through the air. Melissa spotted Rebecca at a corner table, laughing with two other nurses. Catching sight of her, Rebecca stood and waved enthusiastically, beckoning Melissa over. "See, you made it," Rebecca exclaimed as Melissa joined them. The other two nurses, Tanya and Nicole, greeted her with cheerful hellos and scooted over to make room. Melissa felt a wave of relief. She hadn't been out with friends in months, and the novelty of doing something purely for fun felt almost foreign. They ordered a round of drinks, and Melissa started with something mild, a soft blush wine that she could sip slowly. The conversation flowed easily at first. Jokes about the day's chaos, frustrations about misfiled paperwork, and shared admiration for a new intern who had shown impressive bedside manners. Yet, as the chatter continued, Melissa found herself gazing around the bar. Her eyes landed on a man leaning casually against the far end of the counter. He looked to be in his early 40s, with dark hair neatly combed and a tailored jacket that set him apart from the rowdier patrons. Though he seemed reserved, there was something compelling about his presence. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met from across the room. Melissa quickly turned her attention back to her group, her cheeks warming from more than just the wine. Tanya nudged her playfully. "I saw that," she teased in a low voice, "checking out the tall, dark, and handsome one at the bar, huh?" Melissa waved dismissively, yet couldn't deny the spark of curiosity. In her everyday hospital routine, chance encounters and flirtations were the last things on her mind. Yet here she was, feeling an unexpected stir of excitement. Rebecca grinned. "It's about time you noticed someone new. We've all been worried you'd forgotten how to have fun." The conversation moved on to other topics, childhood memories, a recent street fair in the city, but Melissa's thoughts occasionally drifted toward the man at the counter. After another glass of wine, she excused herself to find a quieter spot. The day's stress still weighed on her, and a moment alone might help her process the swirl of emotions. Approaching the bar, she signaled the bartender for water. The man with the tailored jacket was now just a few seats away. She could sense his gaze, though she tried to appear engrossed in checking her phone. Seconds later, he made a polite gesture toward the bartender, then glanced at Melissa. "I was about to order another drink. Would you like something?" he asked in a calm, measured tone that seemed to match his composed demeanor. Caught off guard, she hesitated. "Oh, I have water coming, actually," she replied, suddenly unsure how to navigate a casual exchange. She managed a small smile. "But thank you." He returned the smile, a faint warmth lighting his features. "I'll keep it simple too," he said, requesting another sparkling water for himself. "It's been a long day, and sometimes the best way to unwind is something refreshing without the headache tomorrow." Melissa caught herself studying his expression. There was an unexpected kindness in his voice, a quiet confidence that contrasted with the usual clamor of bar patrons. For a moment, she considered asking his name, but felt her heartbeat quicken at the thought. "I'm Melissa," she finally managed, her voice sounding more timid than she intended. "I'm Jackson," he replied, raising his glass in a gentle toast. "Good to meet you, Melissa. Here's to long days. May they lead to moments like this." A low melody of jazz trickled through the speakers at Redwood's lounge, creating an intimate ambience in the tucked-away corner where Melissa and Jackson now sat. The two had drifted from the bar to a small table near a warm wall lamp, each holding a modest drink. Despite the bustle of conversations around them, their little enclave felt private, as if time momentarily slowed in that soft, golden light. "So you work in healthcare?" Jackson asked, sipping his sparkling water. "At least, that's what I gathered from bits of conversation I overheard with your friends." Melissa nodded, keenly aware of the cautious line she walked. She didn't want to divulge too much. "Yes, I'm part of a hospital team," she said simply. "It's demanding, but rewarding most days." He gave a faint smile. "I can imagine. My father was in and out of hospitals when I was younger, so I've always admired people who dedicate their lives to caring for others." She studied his expression, noticing a subtle flicker of sadness. Before she could stop herself, she asked gently, "Is he all right now?" Jackson hesitated, glancing at his glass. "He passed a few years back," he said quietly. "But I'm grateful to the medical staff who made his final months dignified. Anyway, I guess that's part of why I have a soft spot for healthcare professionals." A wave of empathy washed over Melissa. She knew all too well how a hospital room could become a universe of hope, regret, and final goodbyes. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, keeping her voice soft. It struck her how personal their exchange felt, given they had only just met. Jackson offered a slight nod, then shifted the conversation. He mentioned his love of reading, describing how novels, especially those filled with human drama and moral questions, intrigued him. Melissa found herself drawn into his reflections, surprised by how seamlessly they veered from books to deeper life philosophies. For once, she wasn't clocking the time or worrying about the next hospital shift. Still, an internal barrier hovered, reminding her how fleeting these encounters usually were. She chose her words carefully, avoiding naming her hospital or her precise position. Occasionally, she caught herself wanting to reveal more, but held back. Her routine had shaped her to be guarded, especially after a few past entanglements ended, with her pouring too much energy into people who didn't understand her demanding schedule. Midway through their conversation, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, a text from a fellow nurse at Hillcrest, alerting her to a last-minute schedule change. Melissa's posture tensed as she typed a quick reply. Jackson observed her concern, but didn't pry. He offered a reassuring smile when she slipped the phone back into her purse. "You don't have to tell me the details," he said. "I know how life can interrupt in the worst moments." She appreciated his understanding more than he could know. It was rare that someone outside the hospital bubble didn't pester her for specifics. "Thanks," she replied, her voice lowering. "I just sometimes worry I can't do enough, that the demands are too great." He paused, studying her with sincere eyes. "From what I can see, you seem dedicated. That's admirable. But don't let it swallow you whole," he added gently. "Moments like these, the chance to breathe outside the daily grind, matter." Melissa felt a twinge of guilt. There was so much she wasn't saying. But maybe that was the beauty of this moment. They were two strangers unburdened by workplace dynamics or mutual acquaintances. She could be just Melissa, a tired but hopeful woman stealing a brief respite from her duties. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice warned, "This can't last. You'll be back in scrubs tomorrow morning, and he'll be, who knows." She forced a smile anyway, quietly grateful for the spark of comfort that Jackson provided. If this night was merely a passing refuge, she was determined to savor it, at least for now. The next day, sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of Hillcrest Hospital's lobby as Melissa hurried inside, balancing a paper cup of coffee and a folder full of patient charts. The usual rush greeted her, staff members bustling about, overhead announcements echoing, and that familiar sense of barely contained urgency. Yet her mind kept drifting to the conversation from the night before. She tried to push aside the lingering warmth, reminding herself it was just a casual exchange. As she navigated the corridor toward the emergency ward, snippets of hushed conversations among the staff caught her attention. "They say the new director is starting this week," murmured one nurse to another. "I heard he's going to shake things up." Melissa paused, a sudden prickle of curiosity drawing her in. In the staff break room, she found Rebecca standing by the counter, scrolling through messages on her phone. "Hey," Melissa greeted, setting down her coffee. "What's all this talk about a new director? We barely had time to adjust to the last changes." Rebecca looked up, her expression a mix of concern and intrigue. "Yeah, apparently the old director stepped down abruptly after some management issues. Rumor is the hospital board brought in someone from outside to rework our entire operational structure." She lowered her voice. "I also heard he's very hands-on. People are anxious about possible budget cuts or departmental overhauls." Melissa felt a pang of unease. She loved her patients and her role, but Hillcrest had seen too many administrative shake-ups lately. "Did they say anything else about him?" Rebecca shook her head. "Only bits and pieces. Some claim he has a great track record in hospital administration. Others think he might be strict. No one's entirely sure yet. But there's a staff-wide meeting next week, so we'll find out soon enough." She offered a comforting smile. "Try not to worry too much. You're one of the best nurses here. They'd be foolish to mess with that." Her friend's confidence was reassuring, but Melissa couldn't ignore an odd twist of apprehension in her stomach. She returned to her duties, checking on patients, administering medications, and updating charts. Yet every so often, the thought of a new leader at Hillcrest bubbled to the surface. Could changes be beneficial, or would they disrupt her already delicate balance? Later, while she organized supplies in a storage closet, she remembered her encounter with Jackson. She replayed the ease of their conversation and the subtle empathy in his gaze. For a moment, she allowed herself a private smile. In a sea of medical crises and administrative rumors, the memory of that brief connection felt like a small beacon of light. As the afternoon pressed on, Rebecca found her again, leaning against the doorframe of the closet. "I just peeked into the administration hall. There's a man in a suit talking with some board members. Might be our new director. Couldn't see his face well, though. He has a certain presence." Melissa's heart skipped, though she chalked it up to general nerves. "Presence, like the boss kind of presence." Rebecca shrugged. "I guess so. He looked confident, but maybe that's just the standard look for a hospital director." She frowned slightly. "He kind of reminded me of the guy you chatted with last night. Well-dressed, reserved, but I'm sure it's just a coincidence." Melissa forced a laugh, dismissing the notion. "Totally random," she said, though a faint anxiety flickered inside her. The thought of Jackson being anywhere near Hillcrest seemed impossible. He never mentioned working in healthcare, after all. It was just her mind playing tricks, blending the lines between her personal time and her professional environment. Yet, despite her attempts to brush aside Rebecca's offhand remark, a tingle of curiosity persisted. As Melissa pushed a cart of supplies down the corridor, she glanced toward the administrative offices, doors firmly closed, staff occasionally darting in and out. She felt that something was stirring behind those walls. The possibility that new leadership could alter her routine, for better or worse, weighed on her. Unknowingly, it echoed the uncertainty she felt after meeting Jackson. Small changes were rippling through her life, and she sensed the real impact hadn't even begun. Over the following days, a heightened buzz settled over Hillcrest Hospital. Flyers posted in the main hallway announced a formal orientation meeting with the incoming director. The date and time, circled in bold print, seemed to command everyone's attention. Melissa noticed the uneasy tension among staff who feared departmental cuts or stricter policies. Yet she also felt a quiet spark of hope. Sometimes fresh leadership brought improvements, new equipment, better schedules, or an uplifting sense of direction. Early one morning, Melissa arrived before her shift to check on patient files she had been asked to organize. She was meticulous, wanting to demonstrate her commitment to the nursing team's efficiency. In the back of her mind, she couldn't deny a small desire to stand out positively, to assure anyone in a managerial role that her unit was in good hands. Rebecca joined her, yawning and clutching a mug of strong black coffee. "I see you've decided to show off," she teased, motioning to the neatly labeled folders on the desk. "Someone's eager to impress the new boss." Melissa shrugged, smiling wryly. "Maybe I just don't want any negative surprises at the staff meeting." But the truth was deeper. After her recent realization that her life had become mechanical, she felt determined to reawaken her passion for healthcare. If a new director was going to push changes, she wanted to be part of the solution, not an anxious bystander. "Have you heard any more rumors?" Melissa asked softly, noticing another nurse pass by with a wary glance. Rebecca shook her head. "Not really, aside from the usual speculation that we might see reorganization of certain wings, especially pediatrics or the surgical unit. Some folks say he's a visionary, others say he's tough. No actual confirmation on which is true." They moved to a small meeting room for a pre-shift huddle with the rest of the nursing staff. The conversation turned to strategies for handling patient overflow, tips on comforting worried families, and updates on new protocols. Melissa took notes diligently, keenly aware that each improvement she helped implement would reflect well when the new director assessed their performance. A sense of determination settled in her chest. This was her moment to prove what she could do, not just to management but to herself. Ever since she had allowed herself that single night of relief at Redwood's Lounge, she'd felt more alive, like a door had opened, letting in both fresh air and a small risk. She wanted to step through that door in every aspect of her life, not merely in fleeting social encounters. Walking back through the corridor, she glanced at her phone and paused at a message from Tanya, one of the nurses from the bar outing. "Heard the new director visits each department in person. Don't be surprised if you run into him soon." The note sent Melissa's pulse fluttering. She couldn't pinpoint why. Perhaps it was just the looming unknown. Later, she found herself glancing at the closed doors of the administration office again. She imagined a charismatic leader stepping out, scanning the ward with a critical eye. For a second, a memory of Jackson's smile at Redwood's Lounge flickered in her mind. The swirl of curiosity, caution, and something else, an odd sense of possibility, flickered through her. That evening, as she double-checked her last patient's vitals, Rebecca caught up with her once more. "You ready for the meeting next week?" Rebecca asked in a low voice, mindful not to disturb the dozing patient nearby. Melissa nodded, tucking the chart under her arm. "Yes, and I'm going to walk in there with my head held high. Whoever this new director is, I'm prepared to show him we're capable of great work." She meant every word. Stepping out into the hallway, she felt the weight of her nurse's jacket, once a reminder of long, draining hours, now fill her with unexpected pride. Life was nudging her forward, urging her to embrace change both in her workplace and in herself. Little did she know just how interwoven those transformations would become, nor how a chance encounter over a single drink was about to reshape her entire future. Charlotte Miller, a seasoned nurse of 56 with greying hair pinned into a neat bun, moved through the bustling Hillcrest Hospital corridors with a grace that belied her years of service. She'd been part of the institution longer than most remembered. Her wisdom carried in a gentle smile rather than a strict set of rules. Melissa admired her from afar, having learned countless techniques through watching Charlotte calm frantic patients or smooth over tense disputes among colleagues. On a crisp Tuesday morning, Melissa found Charlotte seated in the hospital's modest cafeteria, sipping a cup of tea by herself. The older nurse beckoned Melissa over with a subtle nod. Around them, the usual clamor of clinking dishes and hurried footsteps filled the air, but Charlotte's calm presence somehow buffered the noise. "Come, sit," Charlotte said in a soft voice. "I've wanted a word with you, dear." Melissa set down her tray, the remnants of a quick breakfast. Glancing at Charlotte's face, she noted the faint lines etched by decades of night shifts and heartbreak witnessed in hospital rooms. But those lines radiated warmth instead of weariness. "I hear our new director's making waves," Charlotte said, stirring her tea. "People fret about changes and layoffs. Even the strongest among us seem jittery." Melissa nodded, her chest tightening. "It's been on my mind too. We're all waiting for something to happen, some major announcement. And I guess—" She paused, summoning the courage to share her real worry. "It feels like my personal life is tangled up in this. I'm not sure I'm ready for more upheaval," Charlotte observed her thoughtfully. "You're a dedicated nurse, Melissa. Patients speak highly of you. But you shouldn't let the hospital define your entire life. Sooner or later, we all have to learn the art of separating ourselves from our scrubs, if only for a short while." Melissa's thoughts flickered to Jackson. She'd forced herself not to dwell on the possibility that he could be the new director, dismissing it as an absurd coincidence. But her heart still clenched every time she saw a well-dressed man in the administrative halls. Before she could respond, Charlotte's gaze softened. "I see more than the stethoscope around your neck, child. You have burdens on your shoulders." She sipped her tea again. "Let me tell you something. I've had my share of regrets for never stepping outside my comfort zone, both in love and career. Don't let that be your story. You have to allow yourself a life beyond these corridors." Melissa found her eyes stinging with unexpected emotion. For so long, she'd operated on autopilot, convinced her job had to take first place in all things. I worry about letting people down," she admitted. "Staff, patients, they rely on me. What if I need a break, or I want to explore other possibilities? Does it make me selfish?" Charlotte reached out, resting a comforting hand over Melissa's. "You're not a machine. Compassion fatigue is real, my dear, and I'm no sage. But I do know that if you deny your own needs, you'll eventually have nothing left to give." She paused, smiling wistfully. "Not that I'm advising you to run off at the first sign of stress, but don't shut out your personal life. Don't be afraid of new connections, romantic or otherwise." They lingered together a few more minutes, discussing the reorganization rumors. Charlotte mentioned wanting to see a more cohesive approach to patient care, hoping the new director might bring fresh energy. She also spoke of her plan to retire in a few years, content with the legacy she'd leave behind. Before parting, Charlotte unclasped a small silver nurse's pin from her own lanyard. "I received this on my 10th anniversary here," she explained, pressing it into Melissa's hand. "It's a tradition some of us older nurses kept alive. Wear it when you need a reminder of why you started, and remember that serving others doesn't mean losing yourself." Touched, Melissa tucked the pin safely into her pocket. She left the cafeteria feeling both comforted and unsettled, grateful for Charlotte's guidance, yet aware that choices ahead wouldn't be simple. The compassion she'd cultivated for years might soon need to expand to include herself, and that possibility both thrilled and terrified her. Stepping out of the hospital's sliding doors that evening, Melissa felt a breeze brush her face. Carrying the crisp scent of pending autumn, a gentle chill signaled the approach of cooler days, maybe a symbol of change for her, too. She had Charlotte's nurse's pin tucked safely in her pocket, a tangible reminder that she deserved room to breathe. Once home, she flicked on the living room lamp, revealing her small but cozy apartment. The walls bore framed photos of friends, her late grandmother, and a few from her college graduation. But there were also bits of her past that she'd never fully let go. A dusty box of letters from a past boyfriend who had criticized her overcommitment to work. Old planners filled with scribbled notes of continuing education courses she never had time to finish, and a stack of postcards she'd once collected, fantasizing about traveling the country. She felt an impulsive need to confront these remnants. First, she rummaged through the letters, each filled with criticisms veiled as concern, accusations that she was too tired for a real relationship or too buried in her job to have a life. Bitterness rose in her throat, but she also recognized a kernel of truth. She had indeed poured herself so deeply into work that she'd neglected other parts of her life. Letting out a shaky breath, she tore the letters in half, discarding them in a small wastebasket. Next came the postcards, each representing a place she'd dreamed of visiting: small towns in Vermont, the expansive deserts of Arizona. She stacked them carefully, setting them aside with a new resolve. Maybe she couldn't travel right away, but she wouldn't keep them hidden anymore. Finally, Melissa retrieved those abandoned course notes and gave them a once-over. The scribbles about advanced pediatric care and holistic patient approaches reminded her that her passion for nursing had never been limited to survival shifts. She'd once aimed to grow, innovate, and perhaps even mentor others. She gently placed the notes in a fresh folder, determined to revisit them soon. The silence of the apartment pressed in, magnifying the significance of what she was doing. Her life for the past decade had revolved around ward schedules, weekend shifts, and frantic nights. On rare occasions, she'd muster the energy to socialize, but always with the sense that she was sneaking away from duty. Charlotte's words echoed, "Don't let that be your story. You have to allow yourself a life outside these corridors." She picked up the phone to call Rebecca. Her friend answered with her usual cheery tone, asking if everything was all right. Melissa confessed that she was in the midst of a mini-purge, throwing out items that no longer served her, holding on only to what might still guide her future. "That sounds healthy, Mel," Rebecca said, the warmth palpable in her voice. "Letting go can be liberating. We carry so much guilt as healthcare workers. It's like we believe we should be on duty every moment, even in our personal lives." Melissa nodded, even though Rebecca couldn't see her. "I'm just afraid that I'm making promises to myself I won't keep," she admitted. "I want to be open to new possibilities, but what if I fail again?" Rebecca let out a sympathetic laugh. "You won't know unless you try. I've been thinking of enrolling in a course to further specialize. Maybe we can both do something fresh together." Just imagine, two unstoppable nurses who finally learn to prioritize ourselves once in a while. After hanging up, Melissa turned to the mirror hanging by her hallway. Her reflection looked tired, yet more peaceful than it had in recent memory. The crumpled papers in the wastebasket felt like a farewell to a chapter marked by stagnation. Slipping Charlotte's pin onto a small keepsake board by her dresser, she resolved to keep forging ahead. Tomorrow, she'd face whatever the hospital had in store for her, and she'd do it with a determination that was no longer burdened by old regrets. The day of the long-awaited staff meeting arrived. Hillcrest Hospital's main auditorium crackled with anticipation. Nurses and doctors filtered into rows of padded chairs, conversations hushed and anxious. A projector stood at the front, loaded with slides detailing upcoming changes, while hospital board members lined one side, ready to introduce the new director. Melissa found a seat near Rebecca in the third row, her stomach fluttering in an unsettling mix of curiosity and apprehension. The lights dimmed. A board member stepped forward, cleared his throat, and began a dry preamble about Hillcrest's legacy of patient-centered care. Melissa resisted the urge to fidget, searching the stage for the silhouette of a person she half-dreaded meeting. The next speaker, a senior board official, then said, "It's our pleasure to introduce you to our newly appointed director, Mr. Jackson Green." A wave of quiet murmurs rippled through the crowd. Melissa's heart pounded. Jackson Green. The name struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her mind raced back to Redwood's lounge. The thoughtful man in a tailored jacket, the soft cadence of his voice, the easy rapport they'd shared. A swirl of shock and confusion clogged her thoughts. When Jackson stepped up to the podium, the spotlight revealing his composed features, she felt heat crawl up her neck. Gone was the casual jacket he'd worn that night. In its place was a crisp charcoal suit, his demeanor confident yet carrying the same gentle countenance she remembered. Their eyes briefly met, and she recognized the flash of surprise in his as well. He paused, scanning the audience before speaking. "Thank you for the warm welcome," Jackson began, voice echoing through the auditorium. "I'm honored to join the Hillcrest family. Hospitals have always been more than just workplaces for me. They're places of compassion, innovation, and hope. My goal here is to elevate that mission." Melissa swallowed hard. The man she'd shared a personal conversation with, the one she'd wondered about since was now her boss. Her cheeks flushed as she recalled confiding bits of her life to him in that bar. Yet, beneath the shock, a flicker of intrigue persisted. Rebecca leaned in, whispering, "Oh my goodness, Mel, isn't that—" Melissa pressed her lips together, giving the slightest nod she'd have to process later. For now, she forced herself to absorb Jackson's presentation. He discussed upcoming improvements, optimizing patient flow in the ER, budgeting for new pediatric equipment, and creating staff development programs. Each point was delivered with clarity, and a few staff members even nodded in cautious approval. Throughout the address, Melissa tried to keep her expression neutral, but she couldn't shake the memory of how Jackson had asked about her job, how he'd thanked her for her dedication. Had he known even then who she was? Or was their meeting truly accidental? When Jackson finished, polite applause filled the room. There was a reserved atmosphere. Hospital personnel rarely embraced change without a dose of skepticism. The board members thanked everyone and dismissed the gathering, instructing staff to return to their departments. As people rose from their seats, Jackson made his way off stage to greet pockets of department heads. Melissa saw him glance her way. Their gazes locked momentarily. She looked down, her heart hammering, unsure whether she should stay and speak to him or slip away unnoticed. Rebecca nudged Melissa gently. "You should probably say hi. Otherwise, it's going to be awkward in the halls." Melissa drew a shaky breath. She felt torn between her professional obligations and the lingering warmth from that night. Deciding it was best to maintain composure, she turned toward Jackson's direction, only to find him already moving among the crowd, exchanging handshakes and quick introductions. If they spoke now, it would be brief and under watchful eyes. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. Her mind buzzed with questions. Could they possibly keep things strictly professional? What if colleagues discovered their chance encounter? And had that night truly been chance at all? The auditorium lights brightened, and she realized that from here on, her once ordinary work life would never be the same. For the next few days, a current of restless energy ran through the halls of Hillcrest. Jackson Green, now officially at the helm, started visiting each department. He'd appear unannounced during shift changes or observe procedures quietly from a corner, taking notes as though studying every detail of the hospital's daily grind. Melissa did her best to focus on patient care, reviewing charts, administering medications, and dealing with the minor emergencies that seemed to pop up hourly. Still, every time she heard footsteps in the corridor or caught sight of a tailored suit, her pulse jumped. It was as though her entire body was finely tuned to detect his presence. She'd seen him only in passing, exchanging cordial nods across the triage desk or the cafeteria line. Neither had broached their prior meeting. Instead, they interacted with a polite distance that left Melissa wondering how much he remembered, or if he wanted to remember at all. Rebecca noticed her friend's composure slip whenever Jackson was near. One afternoon, as they prepped supplies, she whispered, "Mel, you look like you've seen a ghost every time the new director comes around. You two have to talk eventually. Put it out in the open." Melissa, adjusting sterile bandages in a tray, murmured, "I know, but what am I supposed to say? Hey, remember the bar? Let's pretend that never happened because now you're my boss and everything's complicated. That's not exactly easy." Rebecca gave a sympathetic shrug. "Fair enough, but it's messing with your focus. Maybe a short conversation would clear the air." Sure enough, opportunity presented itself sooner than Melissa expected. Later that week, Jackson scheduled one-on-one meetings with each department lead to discuss goals and challenges. While Melissa wasn't the head nurse, her consistent performance often placed her as a temporary lead in her unit. The email came directly from Jackson's office, a meeting to discuss nursing workflows set for Thursday morning. Her stomach lurched. The idea of sitting alone with Jackson in a small room, forced to address departmental updates, felt overwhelming. Questions pinged around her mind. Would they keep it strictly professional? Would he mention Redwood's Lounge? Did it matter? When Thursday arrived, Melissa tried to steady her nerves by going through routine tasks with extra diligence. She wore her most professional scrubs, pinned back her hair neatly, and reviewed a bullet list of points about supply shortages and staff burnout, real issues she planned to raise. At 9:55 a.m., she approached the designated meeting room and found Jackson already inside, scanning a stack of reports. The space was small, bright, with a round table and a few chairs. He looked up when she entered, and a subtle tension flitted across his features. "Melissa," he said, standing to greet her. "Thanks for coming. Please, sit." She forced a polite smile, noticing the quiet sincerity in his eyes. "Thank you for meeting with me," she replied, maintaining a professional tone. For the first few minutes, they stuck to the script, discussing nurse-to-patient ratios, inventory management, and ideas for improved staff training. Jackson nodded thoughtfully at each of Melissa's suggestions, jotting notes. Despite her anxious heartbeat, she found comfort in discussing work. This, at least, was familiar ground. Eventually, Jackson placed his pen down and took a measured breath. "I appreciate your insights. It's clear you've thought deeply about these matters." He paused, as though choosing his words carefully. "Before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to address?" Melissa hesitated, pulses drumming in her ears. This was it. Either she'd risk acknowledging their personal connection or let it remain an unspoken undercurrent. She swallowed. Well, yes. I suppose we both know we've met before, outside these walls." His face reflected relief. "Yes, we did," he said softly. "It was unexpected finding out you work here." Melissa nodded, her voice gentle. "If this complicates things, I understand if you'd rather we keep a certain distance." Jackson held her gaze. "Let's keep this professional, of course. But I don't regret meeting you, Melissa. I just want to ensure that we move forward in a way that doesn't affect our work or your comfort." Her racing heart calmed slightly. Maybe they could navigate this carefully. As they wrapped up the meeting, Both seemed aware that this precarious truce was only the beginning of a far more complicated chapter. The hospital's air felt lighter in the days following Melissa's private meeting with Jackson. Word spread that he was open to staff input and genuinely interested in solutions rather than imposing top-down directives. Doctors and nurses from different wings shared stories of how he listened attentively to concerns, responding with thoughtful strategies. Even the typically pessimistic older staff acknowledged his hands-on approach was a refreshing change. Melissa noticed this shift during a morning briefing where Dr. Patricia Morgan, a seasoned physician in her mid-40s, praised the new director's initiative to incorporate modern telehealth options for certain outpatient cases. "He's cutting through red tape," Dr. Morgan said, leaning against a desk with arms crossed, "but he's also making sure we have the resources we need. That's a rare balance." Behind the scenes, the nursing staff felt empowered. Jackson had created an online portal for suggestions, and many found themselves voicing concerns they'd previously assumed were ignored. More comfortable now after their private talk, Melissa submitted a detailed proposal on reorganizing supply closets to reduce wasted time searching for equipment. To her surprise, Jackson replied the same day, thanking her and requesting a follow-up meeting for implementation ideas. In the lounge area, Melissa overheard a spirited conversation among colleagues. Abigail Reed, a direct, no-nonsense nurse in her early 50s, pointed out, "I'm not usually impressed by administrators, but this one, he's actually acknowledging the workload we face." She then shot Melissa a knowing look, suspecting she was partly behind some of the proposals on improved efficiency. Rebecca, and never shy, piped up from her seat. "We might be on the brink of real progress around here. Could be a game changer if we all work together." Encouraged by these developments, Melissa felt a sense of relief. The hospital was gradually transforming into a place where staff felt heard and patients stood to benefit most. At the same time, her personal rapport with Jackson was a careful dance. They exchanged polite hellos and short work-related chats, each mindful that the entire staff might read too much into any perceived friendliness. One afternoon, while replenishing supplies near the pediatrics ward, Jackson approached Melissa with a file in hand. She stiffened slightly, wary of watchful eyes. "I wanted to see if you'd walk me through your supply reorganization idea. We can schedule a team meeting, but a quick overview now would be helpful." She nodded, leading him to a cramped supply room. The smell of disinfectant and the clang of metal shelves formed the usual backdrop. As they discussed labeling systems and restocking protocols, a moment of camaraderie emerged. Their shared commitment to the hospital's success overrode the personal complexities. After a half hour, Jackson smiled, resting a hand on a shelf. "Your plan is excellent. Let's finalize a timeline for rolling it out. This could save the nurses a ton of frustration." Melissa felt a swell of pride. "Thank you. I've been wanting to tackle inefficiencies here for a while, just never had the right backing." They exchanged a look of genuine partnership. For a fleeting second, it seemed as though they might say more, acknowledge the connection neither could ignore. But the clatter of a wheeled cart in the hallway broke the moment. A young nursing assistant poked her head in, recognized the director, and quickly excused herself. Jackson cleared his throat, stepping back into a more formal stance. Outside the supply room, they found Rebecca waiting with a grin that suggested she suspected more than just talk of inventory. "Hey, I just wanted to confirm. Are we still on for that staff huddle this evening?" she asked Melissa, feigning innocence while eyeing Jackson. "Yes, we are," Jackson answered for Melissa, capturing Rebecca's playful expression. "Let's continue to share ideas that help everyone." With that, he strode away, file tucked under his arm. Rebecca raised a brow at Melissa, who simply shrugged, unsure how to articulate the complicated territory she was navigating. Still, a glimmer of optimism accompanied her every step. She had new allies now, Dr. Morgan, Abigail Reed, and Jackson himself, and the door to meaningful change felt wide open. Peace rarely settles for long in a busy hospital. Late one afternoon, an ear-splitting alarm blared through the corridors, signaling a multi-vehicle accident had led to multiple critical patients being rushed in. The emergency department braced for impact. Melissa, in the middle of finalizing reports on her computer, shot to her feet at the first announcement. Staff scrambled, pulling extra stretchers into triage and clearing space for incoming gurneys. Sirens outside the sliding doors seemed to merge into a single shrill tone. Within minutes, paramedics wheeled in patients with broken bones, head injuries, and open wounds. The emergency ward turned frantic, red lights flashing, the chatter of terrified families, doctors calling out orders. Though adrenaline spiked, Melissa shifted into her seasoned mode. She began triaging the injured, her voice calm but decisive. "We need immediate imaging for chest trauma in Bay 2, she instructed a fellow nurse. "Have the on-call surgeon check that patient with the abdominal wound." Across the chaos, she spotted Jackson observing, eyes sharp. He'd arrived to witness how staff managed crises, but it quickly became evident he'd offer hands-on help if needed. As the gravity of the situation intensified, he stepped in to support non-medical tasks, coordinating with social workers for family members, ensuring the pharmacy delivered necessary drugs to the ER. Melissa could barely catch a breath. One after another, patients filled every available bed. A teen with a broken femur cried out in pain. A middle-aged woman was unconscious with possible internal bleeding. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear, punctuated by the hum of monitors. Recalling Charlotte's advice, Melissa tried to harness her compassion without letting it paralyze her. Meanwhile, the staff struggled with limited resources. At one point, a frustrated nurse called out, "We're running short on IV stands and pressure cuffs." Another shouted, "We need more blankets. Patients are going into shock." Melissa's heart clenched. She locked eyes with Jackson, who immediately tapped at his phone, presumably alerting other departments to gather supplies. Together, they improvised as best they could, converting a storage alcove into a temporary triage spot. It felt like an unending wave of emergencies, testing everyone's stamina. After hours of controlled chaos, the surge began to subside. Some patients were stabilized, others transferred to surgical wards, and those less critically injured moved to observation rooms. Melissa's scrubs were damp with sweat, her hair disheveled from constant motion. She paused by the nurse's station, reviewing a final chart, when Jackson appeared at her side. "You did an incredible job out there," he said, voice low to avoid disturbing the dozing patient nearby. "Your coordination skills saved us precious minutes." Melissa gave a tired nod. "We all did our part. It was a team effort." His expression showed genuine appreciation. "I'm working on organizing a better emergency protocol, but seeing it firsthand, I realize there's so much more we can do to be prepared." Just then, a distressed family member approached, tears streaming. Melissa gently pulled away from Jackson and consoled the man, guiding him to a waiting area. Her empathy and calm demeanor shone through, and once she returned, Jackson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I can see why people trust you so much," he said simply. Amid the swirl of relief after the crisis, one of the older nurses let out a remark in passing. "No wonder she's the director's favorite," implying that Melissa had special treatment. Though the words were spoken softly, they stung. In the thick of an emergency, no one had time to worry about personal relationships, but evidently rumors were swirling. Melissa's cheeks burned. She saw Jackson's jaw tighten. Without addressing it, he turned to finalize paperwork, clearly troubled by the insinuation. The day had tested everyone's professionalism and resilience, but it had also revealed how easily perceptions could shift when employees suspected personal ties. This was only the first sign of greater challenges to come. Exhausted yet resolute, Melissa realized they'd hit their first real obstacle, the infiltration of gossip into an environment already rife with stress. And she had no idea how far those whispers might go, or how fiercely she'd have to fight to keep her reputation intact. Days after the emergency that flooded Hillcrest Hospital with accident victims, life attempted to return to a semblance of normal. But in a place dedicated to health and healing, normal rarely felt stable. Any given morning could unveil a fresh set of complications or triumphs. Melissa discovered this anew as she navigated small but significant challenges, things that didn't command headlines, but wore on staff morale. She started her shift at dawn, greeted by a backlog of patient charts the night team had left behind. One particular patient, an elderly woman with chronic breathing difficulties, had been moved twice during the night. Each relocation risked confusion and errors if documentation wasn't updated correctly. Melissa pursed her lips, vowing to sort it out swiftly. Throughout the day, minor hurdles kept popping up. A shipment of surgical gowns arrived with the wrong sizes, forcing nurses to scramble for replacements. A new hire in the ER, clearly overwhelmed, struggled to find the simplest supplies. Melissa stepped in, calmly guiding her to the correct closet while mentally noting that staff orientation procedures needed serious improvement. Meanwhile, a fussy toddler in the pediatric ward refused medication, requiring gentle coaxing from a seasoned nurse, while Melissa fetched a child-friendly syringe. These were the everyday tests no one prepared you for in nursing school. Managing each required patience, empathy, and resourcefulness, all qualities that Melissa prided herself on possessing. Yet, she sensed a persistent undercurrent of tension in the department. Whispers regarding her relationship with Jackson hadn't disappeared. If anything, they'd grown more subtle but more pointed, offhand remarks, stray glances, or jokes that ended abruptly when she entered a room. Rebecca, who maintained a cheerful front, told Melissa she overheard a couple of staff members speculating that Melissa was getting special privileges based on the new director's supposed favoritism. Melissa tried to brush it off, focusing on the real tasks at hand. Still, the sting lingered, and she worried how quickly casual gossip could erode the respect she'd spent years earning. Adding to the strain, Jackson began rolling out new policies aimed at trimming inefficiencies. On the surface, these changes seemed beneficial, but they meant more documentation and sometimes complicated workflows until everyone adjusted. Certain staff members, resistant to extra steps, grumbled that it was all just paper pushing for the sake of appearances. Melissa overheard these complaints and found herself defending Jackson's goals more than once. "Look," she explained one afternoon to a skeptical nurse, "the new system might be tedious now, but if it prevents miscommunications in the long run, we'll save time." The nurse only shrugged, muttering, "Easy for you to say," before turning away. The same day, a patient with a high fever arrived in the emergency ward. Melissa was assigned to manage her admission, working closely with the on-call physician. As she double-checked the patient's vitals, Jackson appeared quietly observing. He offered a faint nod of encouragement from across the hall. In that moment, Melissa felt a familiar, comforting warmth, an unspoken bond, but quickly refocused on the patient before anyone noticed. Later, she caught Jackson near the storage room, looking over inventory lists. He was approachable enough that she couldn't resist a brief suggestion. "We've had issues with supply mix-ups," she said, tapping a form clipped to her clipboard. "Would it help if we labeled everything by color code instead of just text? Some staff read quickly, others noticed colors first." Jackson smiled, clearly intrigued. "That might streamline things," he said. "Let's test it in one ward first. Get feedback." Their exchange was professional and productive, yet Melissa sensed watchful eyes from staff passing by. Even the simplest conversation felt fraught with undertones. Every day tested her resilience. Could she maintain her reputation under scrutiny? Could she defend Jackson's policies without fueling rumors? At shift's end, she looked around the busy corridor. Despite the minor crises, the hospital kept humming, staff trying their best. If she could endure these daily tests, these endless small fires, maybe she'd emerge stronger, both in her career and in how she handled the messy intersection of personal feelings and professional duty. That evening, after a long shift, Melissa trudged through the dimly lit parking lot to her car. She felt weighed down by more than physical exhaustion. The day's worries replayed in her mind. Rumors at work, the new protocols that divided staff, her own tangled emotions about Jackson. She'd planned to head straight home but found herself parking outside a small diner a few blocks away. Something about its neon sign and promise of hot coffee drew her in. She needed a quiet corner to think. Inside, the warm, greasy aroma of fries and the low hum of conversation made for a welcome reprieve. Sliding into a booth, she wrapped her hands around a steaming mug and tried to sort through her cluttered thoughts. The truth was that her attraction to Jackson hadn't faded. If anything, working under his leadership only magnified the qualities she admired. His commitment to fairness, his genuine concern for patients and staff alike. Yet each time they talked, she wrestled with ethical qualms. She knew all too well how quickly people assumed favoritism or impropriety. Worst of all, she recognized a deeper fear. She'd once been in a relationship where her partner's disapproval of her grueling schedule led to resentment and emotional distance. That memory still stung. Memories of arguments that left her feeling guilty for loving her job. Now, with Jackson, she couldn't bear the thought of risking another heartbreak or sabotaging her reputation. Tapping her fingers on the booth's table, she recalled a conversation with Rebecca earlier that afternoon. Rebecca had cornered her in the break room, whispering, "Girl, these rumors, they're petty, but they could damage your standing. Maybe you should just address them head on." Melissa had sighed, admitting, "I'm afraid if I do, it'll only fan the flames." And part of me wonders if I should back off completely. From Jackson, I mean. She remembered Rebecca's gentle response. "Don't let fear make decisions for you. If there's something real between you two, you shouldn't have to hide or run from it." But fear was exactly what she felt. Staring into her half-finished coffee, she realized she needed clarity. Was a personal connection worth jeopardizing her career and peace of mind? Did Jackson share her anxieties about how others perceived them? In that moment, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Hey, it's Jackson. Just wanted to check in after today's madness. Everything okay?" She stared at the words, her heart thumping. Even a brief text from him felt significant. She glanced around the diner as if someone might be watching, though only a couple of strangers sat at the counter, absorbed in their own meals. Slowly, she typed back, "I'm all right, just decompressing at a diner. Long day for everyone, I guess." A reply came swiftly, "Definitely a long day. You holding up?" Melissa hesitated, her thumbs hovering over the screen. She considered a practical answer, something safe about being tired but fine. Instead, she found herself typing an admission she'd been holding in. "Honestly, it's been tough. Everything feels complicated. I'm worried about how people perceive us." Her phone remained silent for a minute. She sipped her cooling coffee, stomach twisting. When it finally buzzed, she felt a surge of nerves reading Jackson's response. "I understand. The tension at the hospital is overwhelming. Let's talk soon, in person. I want to figure out how to handle this properly." Swallowing hard, she dropped the phone in her lap. She couldn't ignore the relief coursing through her. Despite the discomfort of facing these truths, at least they weren't ignoring the situation. Yet, the thought of laying it all bare, her previous traumas, the swirling gossip, made her stomach flip. Settling her bill, she grabbed her coat and stepped back into the cool night air. Clarity demanded honesty, and that meant acknowledging that she couldn't keep her fears hidden. But embracing that honesty was the scariest thing of all, because it forced her to confront the possibility that love and ambition, trust and career might not coexist neatly. The following week brought a surge of pressure that seemed to corner Melissa at every turn. In the hospital corridors, staff whispers persisted, some subtle, others not. Whenever Jackson conferred with her about department tasks, a few onlookers exchanged glances. If they lingered too long, someone would make a snide remark like, "Guess it's nice to have the director's ear," only half hidden behind a cough. Melissa battled each day's small and large crises, a nurse understaffed in pediatrics, a patient's family growing distraught over delayed test results, and an internal audit that left everyone scrambling to produce records. Under normal circumstances, she'd handled these challenges methodically. But now, anxiety gnawed at her, fed by the sense that she was being monitored, not just for her performance, but for any sign that she was benefiting from a personal link to the boss. Things came to a head one afternoon when a senior nurse, known for her sharp tongue, confronted Melissa near the medication station. "I've been here 15 years. Now, all of a sudden, the new director steps in and we're juggling half-baked reforms," she said, voice dripping with bitterness. Her gaze flicked over Melissa's shoulder. "Funny how you got that new supply labeling system approved so fast. Some of us have been waiting ages for proposals to go anywhere." Melissa's cheeks burned. She kept her tone level. "That system was a joint effort, and we're testing it in just one wing right now. If it goes well, it'll benefit everyone, I promise." The nurse huffed. "Sure. Let's hope your close ties can help the rest of us too." Then she stalked off, leaving Melissa feeling as though the floor had shifted beneath her feet. That same day, Jackson emailed Melissa an invitation to meet about further improvements. Usually, she'd be eager to contribute, but the confrontation still stung. She agonized, worried that even a normal work appointment would further inflame gossip. When she finally entered Jackson's office, she found him behind a desk covered in papers, phone pressed to his ear. He motioned for her to sit. While she waited, she scanned the awards and certificates on the wall, proof of his accomplishments in hospital administration. After a curt phone goodbye, Jackson exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Sorry about that," he said. "We're negotiating new supplier contracts, never a smooth process." His eyes found Melissa. How are you holding up? You look tense." Melissa drew a breath, gathering courage. "Jackson, the rumors aren't going away. In fact, they're getting worse. People are acting like I have some golden pass to push ideas through, or that we have an inappropriate relationship." She swallowed. "I feel cornered, like any move I make is scrutinized." Concern etched into his features. "I've picked up on it too. I'm trying to focus on the bigger picture, but I don't want you feeling targeted. I had hoped the staff would embrace good changes without fixating on us personally." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "What if we tried to keep our distance until the dust settles? If I step back from some of these discussions, maybe the rumors will fade." He frowned. "But I need your insights, Melissa. You're one of the best nurses here. These reforms stand a better chance with your input." He hesitated, then added quietly, "And we still haven't really talked about what we mean to each other. Ignoring that won't make it disappear." Her eyes locked with his, the pull between them undeniable, yet fear overshadowed everything. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "If we cross a line, I could lose more than just professional standing. I could lose the respect of everyone I've worked with. Jackson looked torn, a profound conflict in his eyes. Let's think this through carefully. We don't have to have all the answers right now. But the conversation only underscored their predicament, balancing professional demands and personal feelings in a climate that felt hostile. Stepping out of his office, Melissa realized her worry was morphing into dread. The corridors suddenly felt claustrophobic, as though each step offered no escape from the crossfire of judgment. She wondered if there truly was a way out, or if they were both trapped by the very place they hoped to improve. Melissa's internal turmoil finally pushed her to act. After nights of staring at her ceiling, replaying each pointed comment, she concluded that maintaining a tense, unresolved situation was harming both her job satisfaction and her emotional well-being. There had to be a way to address her dilemma without letting rumors run rampant. Early in the week, she spotted Jackson in one of the hospital's smaller conference rooms, poring over budget spreadsheets. His suit jacket hung neatly on the back of his chair, and he looked up, surprise flashing across his face as Melissa entered. "Melissa," he greeted, setting aside his papers. "Is everything okay?" She closed the door, resolve tightening her posture. "I think we need to talk properly." He nodded, concern and anticipation mingling. "Of course, go ahead." Melissa inhaled. "I can't keep doing this halfway, Jackson. It's affecting my focus, and these rumors, they're suffocating. If we don't define our stance, the hospital grapevine will define it for us." He ran a hand through his dark hair, clearly grappling with the weight of her words. "So what do you propose?" Pausing, she released a quivering breath. "An honest conversation with HR or with a higher-up about boundaries and policies. We let them know there's a personal connection, but assure them we're maintaining professional ethics. This is bigger than us. It's about transparency. If we hide, it looks suspicious. If we're open and professional, maybe they can't throw it back in our faces." Jackson leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning her face. "That's a big step, formalizing it. You realize it might draw even more attention at first." She nodded. "I do. But at least we won't be tiptoeing around, and if the administration is informed, they can't claim we're being deceitful or violating policy." He tapped his pen against the table, mulling the idea. "I've always believed in dealing with issues head-on, but I'm worried about the toll it could take on you. You've worked so hard to earn respect here." "Confrontation might get ugly." Melissa's voice steadied. "I've considered that. I'd rather face it than let gossip keep eroding what I've built, or sabotage something that could be meaningful between us." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, Jackson stood and walked around the table, stopping beside her. "Melissa, I respect your courage. You have a point. No policy disallows colleagues from a personal relationship, as long as it's not influencing professional decisions. Being transparent might be the best way to prove we're not crossing lines." A shaky smile curved her lips. She hadn't known just how much she needed his validation until that instant. "So, we'll do this together. Talk to HR or the board. Whoever needs to know." He nodded, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Yes, but let's be strategic about how. We need to prepare documentation that shows no favoritism in your role, your performance evaluations, anything that might be misconstrued." Her heart pounded. This was the biggest risk she'd ever taken, yet the sense of relief was immediate. "All right," she murmured, meeting his gaze. "Let's figure out the details." After hashing out an initial plan, they agreed to schedule a meeting with HR, hoping to keep the circle small at first. Jackson squeezed her hand briefly before she left, whispering, "I believe in you," with an earnestness that made her chest tighten. Exiting the room, Melissa almost collided with Charlotte, who raised a curious eyebrow at the sight of Melissa stepping out of a closed-door discussion with the director. Melissa offered a flustered greeting. Charlotte's eyes sparkled in quiet understanding, though she didn't pry. "Things all right?" she asked gently. Melissa responded with a nod, a new determination in her voice. "Yes, I'm making a change." While not every colleague would welcome the plan, it was a bold move she felt compelled to make. If it demanded scrutiny, so be it. Anything was better than living in limbo, afraid of every whisper and sideways glance. And a small thrill ran through her at the thought that maybe, just maybe, she was choosing herself and her future for the first time in a long while. Word of the upcoming HR meeting leaked sooner than they anticipated, stirring new waves of speculation. Some employees predicted a scandal, others shrugged, guessing it was just administrative housekeeping. Meanwhile, Melissa and Jackson tried to keep conversations calm and purposeful, finalizing the documentation that verified Melissa's work record, her impartial performance reviews, and the steps Jackson had taken to avoid conflicts of interest in their professional interactions. On the eve of the meeting, tension buzzed around them like static electricity. Rebecca cornered Melissa near the hospital's staff lounge, her expression half supportive, half anxious. "Are you sure this is the best course of action? I'm behind you all the way, but it's a high-stakes gamble." Melissa sighed, adjusting the stethoscope around her neck. "I know, Beck, but letting rumors fester is worse. This meeting won't magically fix things, but it's a step in the right direction. At least then, no one can say we were being dishonest." The lounge door swung open, and Dr. Morgan, head of the clinical unit, stepped inside. She caught wind of their exchange, offering a nod. "I respect the two of you for being forthright," she commented, setting down a stack of patient charts. "Administration might not be thrilled about personal entanglements, but honesty goes a long way in a place like this." Though heartened by Dr. Morgan's words, Melissa still felt her pulse race every time she imagined the meeting. She pictured stern faces at a conference table, pointed questions about her private life, and the possibility that HR might ask Jackson to recuse himself from direct oversight of her department. Could she handle that? More importantly, could her professional life flourish under that arrangement, or would colleagues still see favoritism, no matter the outcome? As if sensing her turmoil, Rebecca nudged her gently. "Take a deep breath. You've got this." Morning arrived in a blur. By 9 o'clock, Melissa stood outside the HR office, arms folded to keep her hands from shaking. Jackson joined her, posture composed, but eyes revealing a hint of nerves. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Inside, a senior HR representative waited alongside a board liaison. The atmosphere was polite but formal, a rectangular table, a neat pitcher of water, and carefully set notepads. Jackson opened by explaining their intention to ensure transparency and address any potential conflicts between his role as director and her role as a dedicated nurse. He described the process they'd followed, documenting decisions to show that Melissa received no preferential treatment, clarifying lines of authority, and emphasizing the hospital's official policy. Melissa spoke next, voice trembling at first. She confirmed that, while they had a personal connection, she upheld every protocol with integrity. She also offered proof of successful team projects that predated Jackson's arrival, illustrating that her work ethic was nothing new. The HR official listened, occasionally scribbling notes. The board liaison asked pointed questions. When did this personal connection begin? How do you plan to maintain a professional boundary? Each query made Melissa's stomach tighten, but she answered as honestly as she could, describing her respect for the hospital's mission and her commitment to not letting personal matters bleed into patient care. Finally, the HR representative slid off her glasses. "We appreciate your candor. The board will review this, but given the documentation provided, there's no immediate evidence of misconduct." Our policy doesn't outright forbid personal relationships, but we do require that departmental oversight be structured in a way to avoid direct reporting lines that could be influenced. She paused, gazing at Jackson. Mr. Green, you might need to delegate certain supervisory tasks over Miss Evans to another administrator, at least formally. Jackson inclined his head. I'm prepared to do that if it helps maintain fairness. When the meeting adjourned, Melissa and Jackson stepped out, feeling cautiously optimistic. They'd laid their cards on the table, no longer weighed down by secrets. But as they returned to the corridors, Melissa could sense the next wave of reaction from staff. She was standing on a precipice, heart pounding, uncertain if they'd find acceptance or more backlash. Yet drowned for the first time in weeks, she felt a strange relief, like exhaling after holding her breath far too long. Melissa's footsteps echoed along the polished tile floor of Hillcrest's administrative wing. She clutched a file of updated staff reports, heart-pounding, as she prepared for a second meeting, this time with key members of the hospital council. Word had reached her that certain council members were displeased with the HR outcome, arguing that personal relationships at a high administrative level could harm the hospital's reputation. The weight of it all pressed on her like an invisible hand on her shoulders. Pausing outside the large conference room, she tried to steady her breath. Inside, she could hear low, serious voices. The council typically reserved such stern tones for discussions of budget crises or regulatory troubles. The fact that she might be at the center of this tension filled her with a strange mix of anxiety and resolve. She glanced at her phone. A text from Jackson read, "I'll be right there with you." A small relief. They'd face it together. After a terse knock, she entered. Around a long table sat 4 council members, each with a stack of papers and an air of authority. Jackson stood at one end, arms folded, eyes flicking to Melissa in silent solidarity. "Ms. Evans," began a man in a grey suit, adjusting his glasses. "Please have a seat. We've convened to review concerns about potential conflicts of interest involving your relationship with our hospital director, Mr. Green. We understand you've spoken with HR, but the council has its own questions." Melissa took a seat, every nerve on edge. She handed over her file, detailing her recent job evaluations, her updated role assignment, and the distinct lines of supervision that Jackson had implemented so she no longer reported to him directly. Council member Randolph, a stern woman known for her rigorous standards, sighed as she flipped through the papers. "There's been talk that you received preferential scheduling or special resources for your ward projects. Can you address that?" Stealing her voice, Melissa explained that her scheduling still rotated with her team, and that the project improvements, including her color-coding system, were initiatives she had proposed long before Jackson's appointment. "You'll see," she said, pointing to an older timestamp. "These documents predate Mr. Green's arrival. After he came, he merely encouraged my existing ideas." The council members exchanged glances. One cleared his throat, leaning forward. "From a governance standpoint, we have to ensure patient care is not compromised and that staff morale isn't undermined by gossip or favoritism. This could become a legal liability if mishandled." Jackson, his voice calm but firm, spoke up. "I understand the council's concerns. That's why we fully disclosed everything to HR. I've recused myself from direct oversight of Ms. Evans, and our policies allow employees to maintain personal relationships as long as professional boundaries are intact. Our focus here should remain on delivering the best care for patients." A brief silence ensued. Melissa's pulse hammered in her ears. She sensed a tension filling the room, a clash between old guard caution and the possibility of a more flexible, transparent work culture. Finally, Council Member Randolph looked up again. We'll need to review these materials and discuss as a body. In the meantime, please continue your current arrangement. No further action will be taken until we deliberate." The meeting ended swiftly. Melissa and Jackson left the room side by side, neither speaking until they reached the hallway. She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "That felt like a trial," she muttered. Jackson's expression was grim. "They're worried about the hospital's image. If we can prove that we're above board, professionally ethical, personally honest, they may decide not to escalate things." Melissa sensed a deeper conflict brewing in her own mind. Her desire to defend her integrity clashed with lingering doubts about whether they'd ever be truly free from scrutiny. Holding the file close against her chest, she realized the real battle was internal, wrestling with the fear that her entire career could hinge on someone else's approval. Yet beneath the anxiety, a spark of resolve flickered. She would not let rumors or council politics erase her accomplishments or her right to have a personal life. That evening, Melissa found a moment of solitude in the small hospital garden tucked behind the main building. Although the sky had dimmed to a hazy purple, the soft glow of garden lamps provided a tranquil space, with a trickling fountain near a bench. She often came here on breaks, but tonight felt different, heavier, as though the garden's calm was the only thing holding her frayed nerves together. She settled on the bench, letting the day's tensions roll through her mind. The confrontational meeting with the council had reopened memories of her past relationship failures, moments when she'd felt unfairly judged for being too devoted to her work. Back then, she'd blamed herself for not balancing personal life well. Now, she faced a new layer of scrutiny: the hospital board, colleagues, even old friends calling or texting her with questions. Sighing, she recalled her conversation with Charlotte earlier that afternoon. The older nurse had sensed Melissa's distress and offered words of comfort. "Scars never fully fade, you know," Charlotte had said, her gentle eyes filled with empathy. "But they remind us we survived. Let each scar be a lesson, not a prison." Melissa appreciated Charlotte's wisdom, but hearing it didn't instantly dissolve her anxieties. She felt torn between forging a legitimate, open connection with Jackson and the fear of letting down her co-workers who might assume she was opportunistic. A soft rustle interrupted her thoughts. Looking up, she saw Jackson approaching. His tie loosened as though he'd escaped another round of administrative calls. Without a word, he settled beside her on the bench, the sound of the fountain masking the hush of night settling in. They sat for a moment, neither rushing to speak. Finally, Jackson glanced at her. "I'm sorry this has been so hard on you. I never intended to place you in such a difficult position. It's not your fault," Melissa replied quietly. "This is my choice, too. It's just the council, staff gossip, my own doubts. Sometimes it feels like I'm dragging old baggage into this." He nodded, understanding etched into his features. "Believe me, I carry my share of scars, too. Leaving my previous hospital was painful. Bureaucratic issues, conflicts I couldn't fix. That's partly why I came here, hoping for a fresh start." His voice wavered slightly. "Seeing you caught in the crossfire makes me question whether I made the right choice. But then I remember that night at Redwood's Lounge, how genuine it all felt. A small wave of relief washed over her that he too harbored such reflections and vulnerabilities." "It did feel genuine," she whispered, recalling the first moment they'd met. Both exhausted, neither realizing how fate was weaving their paths together. Jackson reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a piece of folded paper. "We got a letter from a patient you cared for, an older woman named Mrs. Larson. She wrote a thank you note praising your kindness and professionalism." He handed it over. "I thought you should see it." Melissa opened it under the dim garden light, heart warming as she read the woman's gratitude. Mrs. Larson specifically mentioned how Melissa's comforting presence had soothed her fears. "That's the real reason I'm here," Melissa said softly, looking up. "Helping people in their toughest hours. When I focus on that, the rest feels smaller." Jackson exhaled, his tone softer. "We can't let politics overshadow our purpose, and we can't let gossip define us." He paused, studying her face. "But if it ever becomes too much, promise me you'll say something. Don't shoulder it alone." Their hands brushed, an unplanned touch that sent a tiny jolt through her. She felt the weight of their shared history and the swirl of possibilities that lay ahead. In that quiet corner of the hospital garden, they reflected on the scars that shaped them. Perhaps those very scars would guide them toward a deeper empathy and determination, forging a bond that rumors and council disapproval could never truly sever. In the days following the tense council meeting, a surprising surge of support swept through Hillcrest Hospital. Melissa was astonished to see staff members, both senior and junior, subtly rallying to her side. It began with patient commendations trickling into the administrative office, praising the efficiency of the new procedures Melissa had championed. Then doctors in the pediatric ward expressed gratitude for how the color-coding system cut down their time hunting for supplies. One afternoon, while arranging charts at the nurses' station, Melissa found Rebecca waiting with a grin. "You won't believe this, but Dr. Morgan called me aside to say she's backing your proposals at the next departmental conference. She's convinced we've improved patient care already." Melissa's eyes widened. "Really? That's good news." Rebecca nodded eagerly, leaning in. "People realize how hard you've worked, long before Jackson came along. Some even think the council might be overreacting." In the lounge later, Charlotte beckoned Melissa over to show her a manila folder stuffed with printed emails, messages from staff praising the restructured workflows or celebrating improved patient outcomes. "We've got a real groundswell of positivity, dear," Charlotte said, eyes twinkling. "When the council meets again, they'll find it difficult to ignore the evidence." Encouraged, Melissa approached her next shifts with renewed vigor. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. Though not everyone was on board, there were still pockets of skepticism. She sensed momentum. Each day, she caught glimpses of Jackson working tirelessly in his office or conferring with teams, and she knew they were forging a path of real change despite the swirling controversies. That blossoming optimism was tested when, a few days later, a rumor circulated that the council was debating whether to propose Jackson's relocation to another hospital under the same network. If they couldn't force him to resign, they might at least remove him from Hillcrest. The notion hit Melissa with a jolt. The progress they'd made together could vanish if Jackson were transferred. Late that afternoon, she hurried to find him, eventually spotting him near the surgical ward, speaking with Dr. Morgan. The moment their conversation ended, she approached. "Is it true?" she asked bluntly. "They're talking about transferring you." Jackson's jaw tensed. "I've heard whispers, nothing official yet. But yes, it's a possibility. Some on the council think it's the cleanest solution, avoid scandal by placing me elsewhere." A wave of frustration welled up inside her. "That's not fair. You've improved so much here already." He gave a weary smile. "Things often aren't fair in administration. We can't let that fear paralyze us. If they see how beneficial our changes have been, how staff and patient satisfaction are going up, they might reconsider. We just need to present solid data." Melissa pressed her lips together, nodding. "We have the emails, the stats on workflow efficiency, patient testimonials. Maybe Dr. Morgan and a few department heads can help compile a formal report. I'll do what I can from the nursing side." They sprang into action. Over the next couple of days, Melissa worked late, collecting metrics on reduced wait times and improved patient feedback. Rebecca pitched in, reaching out to the entire nursing staff for statements. Dr. Morgan pooled data from the physician's side, showing how streamlined processes benefited overall care. Even Charlotte lent a hand, using her decades of respect in the hospital to encourage reluctant voices to speak up. In the midst of this whirlwind of paperwork and presentations, Melissa sensed a collective pride swelling within Hillcrest. People recognized they were on the cusp of something transformative, a hospital culture that valued efficiency, empathy, and genuine collaboration. While the potential threat of Jackson's transfer loomed, the staff rallied behind their belief that the hospital deserved better than a forced solution. And as for Melissa, despite the underlying apprehension, she discovered a renewed sense of purpose burning brighter than ever. Whether or not the council decided in their favor, she was determined to stand by Jackson and the vision they shared. In her quiet moments, she marveled at how adversity had become a chance for rebirth. Not just for the hospital, but for her own sense of hope and belonging. Rebecca's voice crackled over the phone one evening, excitement spilling through the line. They've scheduled the final council session for next Monday. That's our chance to present all the data about your improvements, maybe even salvage Jackson's position here. Melissa sat cross-legged on her living room couch, the glow of a nearby lamp casting long shadows on the walls. She rubbed her tired eyes, a small smile tugging at her lips. All right, we have the weekend to finalize everything then. Though her determination was unwavering, Melissa couldn't ignore the knot in her stomach. The looming session felt like a make-or-break scenario, not only for Jackson's directorship, but for her own peace of mind. If the council ruled against them, months of relentless work could unravel. She fought back a surge of anxiety, reminding herself she was no stranger to high-stakes moments in her nursing career. Over the following days, she coordinated with Dr. Morgan and a handful of supportive department heads. They refined a presentation that showcased tangible improvements in patient care, fewer mistakes in supply handling, shorter ER wait times, and positive reviews from families praising the new approach to care coordination. Everything was meticulously documented, with timelines showing these projects originated independently of Jackson's arrival, disproving rumors of favoritism. Meanwhile, Jackson focused on constructing a broader vision for Hillcrest's future, one that aligned with the hospital's core values, but also addressed the council's fiscal concerns. He collected proposals on cost-saving initiatives, potential community outreach programs, and expansions in telehealth that could elevate the hospital's reputation. On Sunday evening, Melissa visited the hospital to go through final rehearsal in a vacant conference room. With Charlotte, Rebecca, and Jackson gathered around a projector, they clicked through slides. The hush of an otherwise empty hallway lent them a sense of clandestine purpose. "Slide 10 needs a clearer chart," Jackson observed, pointing. "We want them to see that improvement in staffing efficiency in a glance." Melissa adjusted the laptop. "Got it. I'll tweak those labels." She paused, feeling the collective tension in the room. They all knew tomorrow's presentation was a last-ditch effort. Charlotte, arms folded but face warm, broke the seriousness. "You young folks are doing something brave. Don't forget that. I've seen too many times when hospital politics buried good ideas. I'm proud of how you're fighting to keep real progress alive." Rebecca nodded, matching Charlotte's supportive tone. "Whatever the outcome, this is bigger than rumor or drama. We're backing real change, and that means a lot." Melissa sensed emotion tightening her throat. She glanced at Jackson, who wore a grateful smile, yet she could see the fatigue in his eyes. After a final pass through the slides, they dispersed. Before leaving, Jackson gently pulled Melissa aside, away from curious gazes. "I know it's been tough," he said quietly, "but no matter what happens, I appreciate how hard you've worked to defend not just me, but the entire nursing department's voice." Melissa inhaled, a swirl of emotions, affection, fear, pride, whirling inside. "I believe in what we're doing here, and I don't want you to disappear from Hillcrest just because a few people misread our motives." In the dim glow of the corridor, he brushed a finger lightly over her hand. "I promise, I'll fight for this hospital and for us." She clenched her jaw, a surge of resolve pulling her posture straighter. "Then let's make tomorrow count. We'll show them the truth." Nodding, he turned to go, footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. Melissa stood there a moment longer, letting her heart settle. Beyond all her fears, she saw a vision, a hospital that thrived on unity, a staff proud of their improvements, and a relationship standing on honesty instead of hidden corners. If tomorrow demanded courage, she felt ready to face it. The seed of hope had taken root, and she intended to see it bloom. The day of the final council session arrived with a somber hush over Hillcrest. Melissa could almost feel the tension in the air as she navigated the corridors. Staff members who knew about the presentation offered encouraging words or nervous smiles, and a few even clasped her hand in a silent show of solidarity. In the large conference room where the meeting was held, council members sat around a long oak table. Some wore stern expressions, others appeared merely curious. At one end, an overhead screen glowed white, ready for the slideshow. Melissa felt her pulse quicken as she took her seat alongside Dr. Morgan, Charlotte, Rebecca, and two doctors who had come to show support. Jackson stood at the front, tapping through the laptop controls. Once the council chair officially opened the session, Dr. Morgan began, her calm and confident voice setting the stage. She spoke of the shifting atmosphere at Hillcrest, how staff morale had improved, and how patients frequently commented on the streamlined care. Then Melissa presented her portion, showcasing charts that illustrated a decrease in inventory errors and a notable drop in patient waiting times. She emphasized the correlation between newly adopted processes and better health outcomes. Nervousness prickled at her skin, but as she glanced around, she saw council members leaning forward, studying the data. Some nodded in agreement. Council member Randolph, who had once questioned Melissa harshly, seemed intrigued. Next, Jackson took the podium. He summarized how these improvements tied into a larger plan for Hillcrest, including cost-saving measures that didn't compromise patient care. He made no attempt to dodge the elephant in the room, speaking briefly on how he and Melissa had disclosed their personal connection and followed ethical guidelines. "Everything we've done," he concluded, voice steady, "has been transparent, documented, and aimed at benefiting the hospital's future." A beat of silence followed before questions flew. The council peppered them with inquiries about feasibility, long-term sustainability, and of course, potential liabilities regarding personal involvement. Melissa and Jackson answered earnestly, referencing hospital policies, the HR meeting's findings, and documented staff feedback. Finally, the council chair called for a moment of private deliberation. The presenters were ushered out, left to wait in a nearby corridor. It felt agonizing. 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. Charlotte gently squeezed Melissa's arm, Rebecca paced, and Jackson stood by the window, brow furrowed. When the door reopened, they filed back inside. The chair cleared his throat. "We've carefully reviewed all the evidence and arguments," he said, scanning the room. "Regarding concerns of inappropriate favoritism or conflict of interest, the Council upholds HR's conclusion that there is no current violation of hospital policy, as Ms. Evans and Mr. Green have maintained professional boundaries and established alternate supervisory measures." Melissa's chest tightened. Good news, she thought, but what about Jackson's potential transfer? Council member Randolph spoke next. "Additionally, given the demonstrated improvements in patient outcomes, cost efficiencies, and staff morale, the Council sees no reason to transfer Mr. Green to another facility. We do, however, request periodic reviews to ensure continued transparency." Melissa felt an overwhelming rush of relief. Rebecca clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a whoop of joy, while Charlotte simply beamed. Jackson's shoulders visibly relaxed, though he maintained a composed nod, thanking the council for their faith in Hillcrest's direction. The meeting ended with a smattering of applause. In the hallway, staff members who had anxiously gathered broke into cheers when the result was announced. Melissa caught Jackson's gaze, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. He crossed the space between them and offered a discreet but heartfelt embrace. "We did it," she whispered, emotion thick in her voice. He pulled back slightly, a gentle smile illuminating his face. "No, you did it. Your dedication and honesty carried us through." In that instant, Melissa felt the culmination of all their struggles, a victory of truth over rumor, of unity over fear. Their future still held uncertainties, but for now they stood on solid ground. As the corridor buzzed with congratulations, she squeezed Jackson's hand, silently promising herself to keep fighting for the hospital she loved, and the connection they'd forged against all odds. Monday morning brought a calmer atmosphere to Hillcrest Hospital than Melissa had felt in a long time. Gone was the buzz of impending council decisions or the pervasive gloom of uncertainty. Instead, a sense of tentative relief brightened the corridors, as though a collective weight had been lifted. Staff greeted one another with renewed optimism, and small smiles flickered across faces that had recently worn deep worry lines. Melissa, too, walked through the main lobby with a lighter step. She passed the reception desk where the usual hum of ringing phones and patient inquiries now felt less oppressive. With the council's ruling behind them, the dark cloud of gossip and potential removal that had loomed so large seemed to have dissipated, leaving space for genuine progress. Her shift began with a quick meeting in the nursing station. The team discussed daily assignments, new admissions, and a couple of ongoing improvement projects. One involved refining the color-coded supply system that Melissa had introduced weeks earlier. It had proven so successful in certain wings that staff asked to implement it elsewhere. Hearing how her idea was being embraced reminded Melissa why she had stayed the course. Where before she might have hesitated to speak up, she now spoke with confidence about how best to expand the system to other departments. After the meeting, she noticed Jackson in conversation with a physician near the cafeteria entrance. He paused mid-sentence to catch her eye, offering a slight nod of acknowledgement. The formal tension that once plagued them had waned, replaced by the comfortable understanding that they could finally move forward without secrets or fear of retribution. Still, they maintained a careful composure in the public setting. Despite the council's verdict, neither wanted to stir fresh gossip. This discreet professionalism was a dance they had agreed upon, openly honest but respectfully reserved in the workplace. Stepping into the break room to grab a cup of coffee, Melissa spotted Charlotte organizing a small celebration banner, its bright letters reading, "Congratulations, team!" The older nurse turned with a mischievous grin. "Dr. Morgan and I thought the staff deserved a morale boost," she explained. "Just a simple coffee and snacks setup in the lounge. After all we've been through, it seems right to mark this new beginning." Melissa felt gratitude well up in her chest. She offered Charlotte a hand with the decorations, tying ribbons onto plastic stands and placing them near the door. "It's a wonderful idea," she said softly. "It's not just about me or Jackson. It's about everyone who kept the hospital going under a cloud of uncertainty. They all deserve to celebrate." An hour later, the lounge bustled with nurses, doctors, administrative staff, and even a few volunteers. Laughter and animated chatter filled the space, buoyed by the sweet smell of pastries. "Doctor." Morgan lifted a small paper cup of coffee, proposing a toast. Here's to the Hillcrest team, resilient, compassionate, and ready to turn challenges into opportunities. The gathered staff cheered, warm camaraderie replacing any hint of past suspicions. Standing off to the side, Melissa observed the lively gathering with an appreciative smile. Rebecca sidled up to her, nudging gently, "We got here, Mel. All that stress, and look at us now, smiling and actually celebrating instead of bickering or panicking. Feels good, huh?" "Better than good," Melissa admitted, returning the nudge. "I feel like we've reclaimed our sense of purpose. This new vision for Hillcrest, a place where initiatives come from collaboration and open dialogue. It's taking shape." Rebecca's brow crinkled teasingly. "And how about your own sense of purpose outside these walls?" "Don't think I've forgotten your personal life." Melissa let out a soft laugh, cheeks warming. "I'm still figuring that out, one step at a time." In that moment, she felt the truth of her words. The council's approval and the hospital's encouraging atmosphere signaled one chapter closed and another beginning. She could now direct her energy toward growing both professionally and personally. The future, once a source of dread, appeared freshly illuminated, an open horizon inviting her to walk forward. Melissa arrived at her apartment after a long yet surprisingly positive day. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through her living room window, highlighting the gentle, neutral tones she'd chosen for her modest home. She kicked off her shoes, savoring the sensation of plush carpet under her aching feet, and set her keys on the kitchen counter with a soft sigh. Though she hadn't explicitly announced it at work, she'd invited Jackson over this evening, a chance for them to connect outside the hospital's watchful eyes. She didn't regret the boundaries they'd upheld in the professional setting, but here, in the privacy of her own space, she could let down her guard. Taking a quick glance around, she straightened a few scattered papers, old hospital notes, a magazine or two, wanting the apartment to feel welcoming. She even lit a vanilla-scented candle on the coffee table, hoping to add a cozy touch. While it wasn't a grand dinner party setup, the simplicity comforted her. 2 people, no deadlines, just a quiet evening away from the wards and meetings. The buzzer rang at precisely 6:30. Melissa buzzed Jackson in, heart fluttering. When she opened the door, he stood there in casual attire, dark jeans, a crisp blue button-down. The professional veneer he wore at Hillcrest fell away in an instant, replaced by an earnest, slightly hesitant smile. "Hi," she said softly, stepping aside so he could enter. "Hi," he echoed, glancing around. "You have a lovely place. Feels calm, like a little sanctuary." She led him to the living room, offering him a spot on the couch. He sank into it, looking at the framed photos on her shelf. One picture showed her graduation from nursing school, another a younger Melissa with close friends at a beach vacation. The corners of Jackson's eyes crinkled in that way she found so endearing. Seeing these photos, "It's like getting a glimpse of you beyond the hospital corridors." Melissa settled beside him. "Nursing's been my life for so long, but I've tried to keep little reminders that I had a life before the night shifts." She picked up a snapshot featuring her old friend group. "We used to plan cross-country road trips. Of course, I was always too busy." Jackson's expression held gentle understanding. "Let's make sure that too busy doesn't define our future. Balance can be elusive in healthcare, but we can still strive for it." Nodding, she felt a small ache. Healthcare professionals often struggled to separate work from personal existence, and she realized she craved that separation now more than ever. "Maybe once things settle at Hillcrest, I'll take a few extra days off, even if it's just to drive upstate and see the fall leaves." He smiled at the suggestion, then turned more serious. "How are you feeling about everything that's happened? The council, staff gossip, the weight of public scrutiny." "Are you really okay?" Melissa considered. "I'm better," she admitted. "Sometimes I worry we've merely found a temporary reprieve, but I also see how supportive staff can be when they realize we're being transparent. Deep down, I feel a sense of hope." She paused, her voice quieter. "And I'm glad we don't have to hide anymore." Jackson reached for her hand, linking his fingers through hers. Warmth radiated from that simple touch. "I'm glad too," he said. "We can't predict every challenge, but at least we know what we stand for, both as professionals and as, well, more than that." Hearing him acknowledge their personal bond as something real and not just a complication filled her with a gentle, steady glow of reassurance. Without thinking, she leaned her head against his shoulder. They sat that way for a while, exchanging soft words and peaceful silences. The window's golden light dimmed into early evening shadows, and Melissa lit a small lamp on the end table. They dined on simple takeout, Chinese food from the cozy spot down the street, and reminisced about how they first met by chance, two tired souls seeking a brief respite at Redwood's Lounge. Neither had anticipated how that night would unravel into a journey involving hospital politics, moral dilemmas, and unexpected love. By the time Jackson left, the candle had burned low, and Melissa's heart felt profoundly full. In that ordinary night, in her ordinary apartment, she sensed a profound shift. No longer burdened by secrecy, she stood ready to let her heart and home both welcome new beginnings. Hillcrest's staff training room hummed with energy as a group of newly hired nurses gathered around a semicircle of plastic chairs. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating whiteboards filled with diagrams of patient care flows and best practice notes. Melissa stood at the front, a projector buzzing softly behind her. Weeks ago, she would have never envisioned herself leading a formal orientation, yet here she was, assigned to mentor the newcomers and ensure they transitioned smoothly into the hospital culture that she'd helped nurture. One built around efficiency, empathy, and transparency. She recalled Charlotte's encouragement. "Use what you've learned, dear. Help them avoid the pitfalls that once weighed on you." Taking a breath, Melissa flipped to the opening slide displaying Hillcrest's core values. "Good morning, everyone," she said, voice steady. "I'm Melissa Evans, and today we'll talk about what makes this place special and challenging. Being a nurse is more than routines and charts. It's about compassion and collaboration." Her gaze swept the room, taking in their fresh faces, some older, some younger, all eager to prove themselves. Among them was Emma, a wide-eyed nurse in her late 20s, who had recently moved from a smaller clinic. Emma locked onto Melissa's words with almost childlike intensity. The session covered practical topics: how to navigate the color-coded supply system Melissa had introduced, how to communicate effectively with doctors and administrative staff, and how to handle the pace of an ER that seldom slowed. But Melissa also spoke of intangible lessons, the value of stepping back to breathe, the need for personal boundaries, and the importance of camaraderie in high-stress environments. During a break, Emma approached, a notebook clutched to her chest. "Ms. Evans, I'm really thankful for the details you're sharing. Honestly, I've been terrified of making mistakes. This hospital's so big compared to where I used to work." Melissa offered a reassuring smile. "That's normal. I remember feeling the same way when I started. The biggest comfort is knowing you're not alone. We all have each other's backs if we communicate openly. And please call me Melissa." Emma beamed at the informality. "Okay, Melissa," she said, cheeks warming. "I'll try to remember we're all on the same team." The training progressed smoothly, culminating in a Q&A where new hires asked about shift rotations, continuing education options, and stress management techniques. Melissa found herself channeling both Charlotte's calm wisdom and her own hard-won insights. She wanted these nurses to avoid the burnout she'd nearly succumbed to. By midday, the training room emptied as everyone headed to lunch. Melting into a chair, Melissa exhaled, feeling a mix of pride and nostalgia. A gentle voice behind her said, "Well done." She turned to see Jackson standing at the door, arms folded with an approving glint in his eyes. Her heart fluttered at his presence. "Thanks," she replied, still mindful that they were in a professional setting. "It feels good, passing on lessons I learned the hard way." He stepped closer, his tone quiet but earnest. "You're shaping the future of this hospital, one new nurse at a time." Glancing around, he added, "I remember watching a training session here shortly after I arrived. You were assisting, but not leading. Seeing you now, it's an incredible growth." Melissa felt a blend of warmth and gratitude. She thought of the confrontation with the council, the rumors, the sleepless nights, how far she'd come from a nurse who rarely spoke out to someone who shaped policy and guided new recruits. "I couldn't have done it alone," she admitted. "Not without the support of Charlotte, Rebecca, and you." He nodded, eyes kind. "Team effort indeed. I was just passing by and wanted to say how impressed I am." A flicker of personal affection softened his features before he cleared his throat and maintained a respectful distance. "Anyway, I'll let you get back to it." After he left, Melissa gathered the training materials, a smile lingering on her lips. The sense of a shared journey was unmistakable. She'd started as a dedicated but exhausted nurse, yearning for change without knowing how to initiate it. And she had become a bridge for newcomers, guiding them away from the pitfalls of burnout and showing them how to thrive. Each question she answered, each tip she offered, felt like a small ripple in a much larger tide of transformation within Hillcrest. Late afternoon sunlight slanted across Hillcrest Hospital's main lobby as Melissa paused by the reception desk, collecting signatures for the final paperwork. Today was special. A modest farewell gathering was planned for Charlotte, who had decided to begin her transition into retirement. Though Charlotte would stay on a few extra weeks to ensure a smooth handover, everyone felt an undercurrent of bittersweet emotions. Visitors and staff mingled in the front hall, the day's last rush of patient check-ins winding down. A cluster of balloons floated near a table covered with a simple cake and a few platters of snacks. Melissa approached Charlotte, who stood talking to Rebecca and Dr. Morgan, her usual calm presence brightened by a proud smile. "It's not really goodbye yet," Charlotte said with a faint laugh, noting Melissa's slightly misty eyes. "I'll still be around, training my replacement, but after 40-some years in these halls, I feel ready to rest, knowing the hospital is in good hands." Melissa's chest tightened with gratitude. "It won't be the same without you, Charlotte. You've guided us all, me especially. I can't thank you enough for teaching me there's more to life than a title on a badge." Around them, staff voiced similar sentiments, some sharing heartfelt stories of how Charlotte's wisdom had shaped their approach to patient care. Even a few tears glistened as younger nurses recounted her calming influence during chaotic emergencies. When a lull finally came, Charlotte clasped Melissa's hand. "Promise me one thing. Keep passing the torch. Your compassion and drive to make things better, those qualities are exactly what Hillcrest needs." Swallowing a surge of emotion, Melissa nodded. "I will," she whispered, remembering her early days and how Charlotte's unwavering support had helped her find her own path. She felt the small nurse's pin Charlotte had once given her, now safely pinned to her ID lanyard, a symbol of continuity. Jackson appeared, stepping forward to offer Charlotte a warm handshake and a few words of gratitude on behalf of the administration. In that moment, Melissa observed the entire hospital family gathered, the board members who once questioned them, The dedicated nurses and doctors who had grown to respect Jackson's leadership, and the new recruits looking to Melissa for mentorship. The tapestry of connections felt stronger than ever. As the informal celebration wrapped up, Melissa walked outside with Jackson. Late summer air touched her face, and the sky glowed with warm hues of orange and purple. They stepped away from the building, letting the hum of traffic and the occasional siren remind them that life kept moving beyond these walls. "I can't believe how much has changed in just a few months," Melissa said, glancing toward the hospital's towering facade. "I remember standing here, not knowing if I'd keep my job or if you'd get transferred," Jackson exhaled, following her gaze upward. "And now we stand on steadier ground, both of us changed by it. For the better, I hope." Her heart swelled, recalling the anxious nights, the tense council hearings, and the quiet confessions they'd shared. She couldn't deny they had emerged stronger. Absolutely for the better. He slipped his hand gently around hers. Though there was still caution about overt displays of affection near hospital grounds, a simple handhold felt right. She remembered the nights she'd leave the hospital feeling drained, not knowing how to balance her desires with her duty. Now, she understood that true balance arose from honesty, from trusting that meaningful work and meaningful relationships could coexist if nurtured with respect. They stood there in comfortable silence, the setting sun painting the horizon in soft gold. Life would go on with new challenges, more patience, more policies, more heartbreaks and triumphs. But within Melissa's heart, boundaries once defined by fear had expanded. She could see beyond them now, a future where she continued to grow as a nurse, a mentor, and a woman unafraid to embrace love and life in full measure. And so, together, hand in hand, they took one last look at the hospital doors, then turned toward the promise of tomorrow. For in the quiet breath between day and night, Melissa realized she had stepped far beyond the borders she once thought confined her. She was free, standing on the threshold of a life enriched by hope, compassion, and the unwavering courage to follow her heart. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.